This meeting is called to order at 7:10 PM. Sorry for the technical difficulties we had. The land acknowledgement first and then roll call?
Roll call first.
Roll call first.
Thank you. Member Fasoon?
Here.
Member Hodges?
Here.
Member Larson?
Here.
Member Lieberman?
Here.
Member Melgen?
Here.
Member Mohammed?
Here.
Chair Vahil McClanahan.
Here. This is the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Allotted tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right, we're going to move to the approval of the minutes from April 17th.
Are there any questions or comments related to the minutes?
Do we have any public comment related to the minutes?
Not seeing any hands raised online.
I make one administrative comment. I don't know if this is relevant, but I did have trouble viewing the minutes previously, and then I was just looking on my phone, and I was able to download them, but not view them in view mode.
Okay.
Just noting
noted
that. I was able to read them, but it just, I don't know if there's a weird glitch or something.
Thanks for
I
letting
had a similar problem with one of the attachments, the memo attachment. The eyeball mode wasn't working, but the download mode was working.
Thank you. I'll forward that along to our tech folks. Thank you. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Member Fasoon? Yes. Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Chair Vahil McClanahan.
Yes. All right, now it is time for open public comment.
First is Nick Peterson. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Again, it'd be nice to, I'm not seeing the timer, but anyway, thank you. So congratulations on the passing of the Climate Emergency Declaration. I think that is really critical. I know here at ACAC, we will be, thank you for putting up the timer. We'll be coming to the Climate Action Committee with some priority issues that we really want to move ahead because of the urgency of the situation. I think there still is a strong need to have the city view and coordinate their actions on everything they do through the lens of climate action. And that really is still not happening later on when we talk about the presentation on the lessons learned. I have some comments there that I'll make. But one of the recent actions that happened, and I know we talked about this before, but committee member Eric Larson has done a lot on electrification of vehicles, and there was a golden opportunity with a very small, simple vehicle that has been made in an electric form for many years. And that didn't happen because of supposedly substantial mechanical issues, which I have just the most difficult time believing, seeing is that these type of vehicles have been around forever. This is what this company provides. They're the foremost company in making these vehicles. So I think we need to find out who are making these decisions, why they're making them. I don't think it is through a lens of climate change. I think it's more through a lens of business as usual. And I get very worried that, you know, we're slipping down in our urgency around climate and making sure certain climate things happen. So thank you very much for working hard on the climate emergency declaration, but we here at ACAC are going to be holding you guys accountable to that and making sure we're moving forward, addressing this crisis in the urgency that it needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to our next public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi, this is Catherine with the Albany Connection Coalition. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I just want to agree with and reiterate what the previous speaker was saying, Nick, around given that we've got this wonderful climate emergency declaration, would like to see that reflected more in city actions. It feels very frustrating that we have these wonderful lofty goals and then little things just keep slipping, like having more gas vehicles getting bought when clearly something like a parking vehicle is, you know, very easily electrified. You're not driving hundreds and hundreds of miles out of town. You know, no concern there should be about charging stations, for example, you know, that with other people may have about EVs. But locally, again, we should be focusing on electrification of vehicles. First of all, secondly, electrification of city facilities. If we want to be a leader in climate action and act in this emergency, you know, we'd love to see a plan for how do we walk the talk and not just talk about things like electrification. For example, induction stoves at the community center, heat pumps, etc. And in terms of a third item I wanted to mention was moving up the possible net zero due date or deadline. I saw today a recent paper from NBER about how every degree increase in warming decreases GDP by 12%. I think that's global or that's the US, but it's still pretty sizable. So everything we can do to advance our goals to get these to happen faster will help make a difference and show the way for other cities. Albany can be a leader and in this area. So thank you for your consideration and for your time.
Thank you very much. That is all for public comment.
Thank you, commenters. We're moving on to the announcements.
Okay, I have several announcements today, many of them to do with the recent committee actions and council. So first of all, I think as some of the speakers mentioned, at the previous council meeting on May 6th, the council unanimously adopted the climate emergency declaration that the committee sent to them. And then in that same meeting, we also had a discussion with the council regarding the gas line decommissioning pilot project that the committee discussed in March, I believe, and had a really interesting discussion with the council. I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go and watch that item to kind of get the full version of that discussion. It didn't result in any particular motions, but they did provide really useful direction on the prioritization of blocks. And in particular, they were focused on equity and potential approaches to learn more lessons from the project and to gather a lot of information. So those were 2 points of focus. But again, if you go onto the city website where you see our agendas, you'll be able to see that council item and watch it on YouTube if you'd like to see the full version of that. And then finally, relating to council, the fleet electrification recommendations that the committee sent to the council have now been agendized for the upcoming council meeting, which is on Monday, May 20th. That's on the consent calendar. And I would highly recommend the committee sending one or multiple members to comment or provide feedback. In particular, Member Larson, who is the author of the recommendations, may be helpful to provide more context and answer any committee questions or council questions that may come up. And then finally, I have a bittersweet announcement in that Member Mohammed is going to be leaving the committee. She is off to very exciting things in college and lots of adventures. And of course, we're very grateful for her time with us and for serving as chair for so long. And next month we will have a proclamation for her, so hopefully you'll come back and hear that. So many thanks to Member Mohammed, and of course with this news there's also now going to be a vacancy on the committee, so we encourage everyone to send out the application if you have anyone you know who might be interested in serving. Mayor Mickey will be the appointing member of the council for this seat. And I can share that application information with the committee afterwards, but in general, it is available on our website. Any other announcements or any questions on the announcements?
Can I make an announcement about something going on in AUSD?
Yes.
All right. This will be informal, and I think later they will make a formal communication, but they have been making changes that I think were mentioned in the planning stage a year ago to their lunchroom for more sustainability. So they've got, they bought a high-efficiency dishwasher. They're going to be rolling out reusable utensils. They have those little milk cartons, you know, that you get in school. Those aren't compostable, apparently. So they have replaced them with bulk dispensers for milk and cups. And they have bulk dispensers for cereal as well, so they don't have all those little packages. So, oh, and the middle schoolers are getting water bottles in aluminum instead of plastic, and they can reuse those. So all very exciting and good changes over AUSD.
I had one civics question or process question. So it sounded like, if we've brought an item to the council, were you saying that there's an avenue for us to, I guess, participate to actually present or answer questions that as not just a member of the public?
Yeah, excellent question. So anyone of the members of the committee or in general can of course attend the council meeting and provide public comment on any item. And then oftentimes, if it is a committee recommendation and there are questions for the committee, the council might ask a committee member who's commented to provide an answer to a question. And so in that circumstance, if a member is available, the council can say, member, can you please answer this question that we have? And they'll be allowed to speak again and, provide some more input to the council. Every once in a while, it is possible for a committee member to give a presentation, although usually that's done by staff. But yeah, in this case, any members of the committee can go and provide comment, and then if the council has follow-up questions, it's nice for someone to be there to be able to answer those.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. And then the second one, I just wanted to see if there's a window to talk about it. I noticed this was the second month we've had kind of the public interested in the parking meter vehicle procurement decision. So I was just wondering if there's anything on the city side you might be able to provide some info on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we know that that's a concern for members of the committee and the public, that recently the police department purchased, or I don't know if they actually purchased it yet, but they got council to approve a purchase of a new parking enforcement vehicle. These are the ones that give out parking tickets. And the new vehicle is gas-powered rather than electric. So this is something that is, those vehicle purchases and decisions are handled within each department. So that was a police department analysis and decision. I've had some discussions with the police department folks about how this works. I know that they do investigate electric options when they buy new vehicles, and what I've heard from them is that oftentimes they have very limited choices for vehicles based on very particular needs for the police department, kind of logistical size things, all kinds of stuff about the vehicles. And I believe their concern about the electric model of this particular vehicle was that there had been battery fires. But that's all to say, I don't know the whole story on it. That's an analysis that happens within the police department. And vehicle purchases are kind of done on the department level. So it's not something that we really have any influence over or that the committee does, except in the format of that fleet recommendation that the committee has already passed and is now going to council. So, you know, what I'd say sort of in response to, you know, how do we prevent this from happening in the future? What can the committee do? Is that kind of recommendation to prioritize electric vehicles and new purchases and to direct staff throughout the city to do that is really sort of the best route for that future prevention. And obviously the timing didn't quite work out for it to have an impact on this purchase, but I do think that you know, having that recommendation to the council at the upcoming meeting is probably the most effective motion for the committee to make at this time. Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful for a kind of understanding of it. If the committee feels like there needs to be more discussion of that, we can consider ways to agendize it or something similar in the future. But if not, hopefully that serves as a good explanation. Yes.
Is the police department's analysis available to the public, or is it something that I could do a Public Information Act request on?
Great question. So they did provide a memo to the council as part of the request for approving the vehicle purchase, and the memo does include some explanation, although it doesn't go into a lot of detail necessarily. You could submit a Public Records Act request. I don't know what exactly falls into the scope of the Public Records Act or what would be something you could receive, but you could always try and see what comes up. Yeah.
We sort of flowed seamlessly into questions about announcements. Any other questions about announcements? How about some public comment on the announcements?
We do have public comment. We will go with our first one. You may begin when you're ready.
Yeah, hi, Nick Peterson. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition again. So since Michelle went into great detail on this, I have a real concern that the departments are just doing business as usual. I mean, we've heard this again and again, like from Public Works not using battery-powered equipment, and you know, you can't get police, even a trial police cruiser and electric. We are fighting against major forces out there that don't want to change, that don't want to embrace the way things are. I'm sure we talk to vendors and they would rather just sell the thing that they've always sold before. Again, there's an exact same vehicle from the same manufacturer that practically provides every single police department in the country with this type of interceptor parking meter vehicle. They would not produce a vehicle that endangered their reputation because they are going to be selling that vehicle primarily in the future because everything's going to go electric. So I back up what committee member Dan recommended. We need to see this in writing, we the public. These decisions are being made by someone way down the chain in the department who doesn't want to make the effort to do the right thing. And that is just unacceptable to the citizens of Albany. And we're going to push these things really hard because we've been snowed over in the past, and it's just too stovepipe. This is why the city really needs someone that reports directly to the city manager that is coordinating the climate actions. This is an emergency. This is critical. We need to do actions quickly. Yay, we get another 10 years of a gas-powered parking patrol vehicle. I mean, I just saw the other one, the one today. It didn't even look like it was in that bad shape. But anyway, maybe we're getting another, and we'll have 2 of them floating around, gassing up down in this fair. So I think it's critical to do this and not just, it almost seems like we're being tentative. Oh, we don't want to offend anybody. But I think we need to offend people and find out why they're really making these incorrect choices. Because it's not in keeping with the strategic plan from the city council. It's not in keeping with the emergency declaration about climate change. It's not in keeping with what the Albany citizens want. So there needs to be accountability. And I think we as members of Albany Community Climate Action Coalition are going to ask for that. We're going to demand it. So if you guys can't get it, we'll get it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi, this is Catherine again, also with ACAC. Fully agree with Nick's comments earlier. I appreciate his detail and enthusiasm as well. I agree that we need more attention that's holistic and system-wide, not just we have a declaration here and then other decisions like made business as usual there. One other thing to consider is that sometimes EVs can be superior to gas or diesel powered vehicles. I saw something about an electric ambulance that actually provides a quieter ride with less vibrations, which is easier for patients, less disruptive, less stressful, and better for paramedics, for example. So, perhaps there's some education opportunity around superior performance opportunities for the experience of the user in EVs, as well as exploring whatever the traditional current, needs that they have are. Wanted to say thank you, Katie, for the school district bulk areas, material, having less waste. Question I have for the council is the building decarbonization block grant on when that's going to be coming out. I know a lot of folks are very excited about this. The building decarb community is excited to see this happening in Albany, and I'm just personally curious to know when it's going to be coming out so people can get going with that. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. That is all for public comment.
Thank you, commenters. It's time for any discussion that the committee might have about the announcements.
Yeah, I've said this before, so sorry to repeat myself. And everything that has been said about the parking enforcement vehicle, maybe 100% correct. I just don't know it all. But about the earlier purchase of police vehicles, I tracked that down. I talked to the sergeant in the Albany Police Department at length about that decision, and he explained to me, he personally is an electric vehicle enthusiast. He's owned several of them starting in 2013. He owns 2 right now, and he really wanted to find an electric vehicle that would satisfy the department's needs. He mentioned in detail 2 of them. One was just too small. The front seats wouldn't go back far enough to accommodate all the equipment and the police officers. The other one, I'm sorry I don't have my notes here, but he talked about a Tesla model, and it sounded really appealing in a lot of ways, but it did not have full frame rear doors, meaning that a bad guy in the back seat could just bash through the bottom of the door, cause a lot of damage. And that same vehicle had a glass roof, so a bad guy could take off his shoe and smash the roof. So he decided that the current crop of EVs just didn't include a suitable option, and he's really hoping that the next time this decision comes up, which is not that far away, maybe 18 months, 2 years, because they rotate through, he's hoping that there will be better options. I just thought I'd mention that if anybody wants to go to that sergeant, I can give you his name offline, you can talk to him, and then come back with maybe a different interpretation. Thank you.
I'll just note that other police departments have overcome those issues because other police departments have vehicles that are electric, including Fremont.
Yeah, that was mentioned. The sergeant mentioned to me that Fremont has 1 electric vehicle, which he said they use as a show model. They roll it out there to show people, get goodwill. But he told me that they don't have any, to his knowledge, that are actually being used on a day-to-day basis. Now, this was months ago, and he may be incorrect. I mean, who knows? But there's, anyway, that's enough.
Related to another one of the announcements about the fleet electrification item coming to council, I feel like it's a little weird to share in this forum, but I'm not sure where else to share it because we don't really meet except now. So I wanted to say, as the one person who did not vote for that, that I wished I had been able to vote for the different parts differently, just in case you do go in. That does come up because I'm very passionately in support of the first 2/3 of it, which are the meaty parts, which are the parts about, getting chargers set up and prioritizing the purchase of electric vehicles. I love that. I was just being really uptight about the third part, which was the directive to look into chargers on public property, because that was, the report back from that was the very first thing that I heard on my first meeting here a year ago. So I thought, oh, we're really going to ask everyone to do the same thing again? But anyway, if that comes up, I wanted to clarify that. Mostly, I'm really excited about it. Maybe I should have just voted for it.
And I am
Yeah.
planning to go to city council.
Okay, great.
You're all welcome as well, but
Yeah.
I am planning to be there.
I might like phone in or something to
appreciate the
comment.
Yep.
I also have sort of a response to the public commenters. I really appreciate you guys and your intensity and your dedication. And I do concur that, getting an electric parking vehicle has value, both it has measurable climate value in and of itself, and it has symbolic value. And also, I agree more strongly with the comment that was made earlier in this meeting, also by a public commenter, that we need to hustle up and get to net zero faster. And to that end, I welcome ideas and comments that have a broader reach, that include wide-scale change in the way we transport ourselves and in the way we power our homes. And I mean, I think the DOE grant is such a wide-scale change. I would love to see a lot of more energy on our committee, as well as from our activists, the big changes to make another big jump, like the big jump we saw in our emissions going down when we converted to Ava Energy. That was great, because we just had to say yes. Everything else is going to be a lot harder. But I'd love to hear an emphasis on ideas that reach more people and reach more, for example, vehicles. That's all.
Can I comment on the comment?
I do want to be careful not to
Yeah, I
get
know.
too far off track of our agenda items, but perhaps if it's pointed and brief.
I just totally agree, and just want to remind everybody that we do have the climate action plan. That's our blueprint. And that's sort of been our strategy all along, is going back to that. And once we've done everything on that list, then it's time to, that's not the time, but it's, we have a list. We have the blueprint, and if it's not sufficient, then we should revise it. But we have the information. I'm working on it.
Sorry. All right, let's go to our presentation.
Excellent. One moment, please. Okay. Okay, so for our presentation today, I'm going to be discussing lessons learned from Carbon-Free Albany and the Green Business Program. These are two programs that the city has done outreach on and, worked on as climate action measures in the past. And they haven't been huge successes, kind of varying levels of success in some ways. Right now, the city is paying for them through Measure D funds, which are funds that we receive as part of a county-wide tax on waste, and which we can use for all sorts of things that reduce waste. Neither of them are particularly expensive in the larger scheme of things, but as staff, we've determined that at this point, they're not really serving the community, and that money could be better spent elsewhere. And so we plan on not renewing those contracts when they come up again. So with that in mind, we wanted to talk through kind of what these programs are, ways in which they did succeed and the kind of promise that they had, and then also ways that they failed and the kinds of things we can learn from them as we do more work like this in the future. So I'll start off with Carbon-Free Albany. This is an interactive online platform that is really all about climate engagement and getting people to take on climate actions. So it's a program and a platform that's hosted by a company called Community Climate Solutions. And basically, they set up city-specific websites. So the one for Albany is called Carbon-Free Albany. And the websites have city branding and city information and kind of things specific to, the average electricity use of a home in Albany and carbon reductions in a place like Albany and things like that. So it is localized. And then it has a whole menu of actions that can be used to reduce personal emissions. So things like installing a heat pump or going vegetarian or biking to work, a whole range of different kinds of options. And really the kind of idea behind the website was to create almost like a social network of climate action, where you have a bunch of people in the community who are signed up, who have profiles, who are publicizing the actions they're taking, and there's kind of competition and communication between neighbors. There are challenges, and people can join groups. And so it was actually a really exciting, kind of promising idea. And go ahead here. So this is an example of the page with some of the actions on here, just to give you a sense of it. And to kind of give you some of the history of Carbon-Free Albany, our Albany version of this. This launched in the beginning of 2019. In 2018, the Community Climate Solutions came to the committee and presented it. And then at the end of 2018, staff worked with them to develop the Albany version of the site. And it launched in early 2019 in connection with the CAP development process, with the kind of outreach that was beginning at that time. And so it was sort of meant to be, a standalone effort, but also kind of in concert with CAP outreach. During 2019, staff did a lot of online outreach, and then also some on-the-ground in-person outreach as well, particularly with community groups. Lizzie in particular did presentations with 5 different community groups. And part of the effort and really the design of the website was to get existing groups involved, where they would all sign up together and they would sort of run a challenge within the group or between groups and sort of use existing social connections to move online and organize effort in that way. Then in 2020, we continued with more community group outreach, doing more workshops and communications with lots of different groups within the city. Staff also held a public workshop that had over 50 attendees, and then also a group challenge that was run by staff and had a lot of outreach and prizes and things related to that. And then finally in 2021, there was a student intern who conducted more outreach to 15 community groups, tried to get those to sign up and run a challenge, although none of those were successful. And then also the Climate Action Committee had a subcommittee focused on outreach, and that subcommittee held an event that was specifically meant to be for community representatives to kind of then bring it back to their community groups. And then it was also just open to members of the public in general. And with all of this, what we saw was that we did get signups, especially kind of in the very beginning while we were doing all of that CAP outreach that was bringing a lot of people in to engage. We saw a lot of signups, but then those started to dwindle pretty quickly and have basically flatlined over the past several years. We just really haven't seen a lot of new signups at all. And in particular, we've seen this flatline in the emissions reduction. So, when you sign up for the website and you put in actions that you're committed to or that you've already done, it shows the emissions you're reducing. And we saw a lot of people signed up and put in all these things, and then that just kind of stopped. And so there hasn't really been this ongoing engagement in the platform, which is really what it was designed to do, is to have people sign up and then continue engaging, continue getting new information and learning things and doing new actions. And what we saw was we could get some people to, create their account and click yes in that moment that they were engaged, but it didn't last. And so, and even then it was also pretty difficult to get any signups in the first place. I think the public workshop that got 50 attendees got 2 signups from it, so fairly small numbers overall. And it just really kind of peaked at the very beginning and then never caught on. So that was disappointing, obviously. And we saw that, this is probably some of the most intensive outreach we've done to community groups within the city. And again, it just didn't really catch on with those groups. We made a lot of connections and had discussions with them, did presentations, but none of them brought that back to their groups, organized to get people to sign up, organized a challenge, anything like that. So, it's not to say that it was a complete failure. We did get people signing up and learning things. We did, give people a platform to learn about new actions maybe they hadn't heard of, but it didn't do the job that it was designed for. We saw that it didn't really inspire a lot of action. The sort of competitive approach didn't really seem to resonate with people. And overall, just the concept seemed to just not quite fit with what the community was looking for. So before I kind of do my overall lessons learned, I'll talk about the Green Business Program for a bit, which sort of similar in some ways and different in others. This is a much longer running program. It's a certification program for sustainable businesses. So it's similar in some ways to being certified organic. And basically there's a checklist of items of all different kinds that businesses have to complete in order to receive their certification. So things related to energy, things related to waste. There's some various categories depending on the type of business. And you have to kind of complete a few from each category, basically. Once you are certified, you get put on this map that you can see on the right here on the Green Business website. You get access to the Green Business Network and to the resources that they have. They do have access and helpers for, getting rebates and other things like that. And then you also get like a decal saying that you're a green business. This is something that actually was founded in the 90s, and the Alameda program was the first green business program in all of California. I was going back through our records, and as far as I can tell, we started participating in the early 2000s, it appears, although that's getting back before our computers have the records saved on them, so I can't say for certain. But over those years, basically the way this has worked is, around 2002, we launched the program in Albany. In order to launch in a city, basically, we are paying in some funds to support the work that the program staff are doing, and it's free to businesses, so that's what I mean by we launched it here. And in 2002, we had 4 businesses that were certified. In 2005, the Chamber of Commerce kind of caught on to this and launched what they called the Green Albany Project, which was basically a collaboration of the Chamber of Commerce and the Green Business Program to try to get more businesses involved. And that was sponsored by Stop Waste, and also staff donated staff hours to help with that work as well. And at that point, there were 11 businesses certified. And it seems like over the period that was running, it was very successful, because in 2009, we had 19 businesses. But in the decades since, or I guess 15 years now, we've really seen that dwindle. And today we only have 8 businesses that are still certified. A lot of those previous ones either went out of business or didn't renew their certification. In 2022, we really tried to beef up this program again and breathe some new life into it. That involved very extensive in-person outreach on Solano Avenue. Both city staff and Green Business Department staff were going out and having conversations with quite a few business owners to talk about the program. We also did mailers in the business renewal mail, which all the business owners got, did a proclamation of appreciation for green businesses, and just kind of ongoing communication with several businesses that, showed some signs of interest. And what we saw in that process was that there were a few businesses that seemed kind of interested and just never actually followed through. There were 2 businesses that did follow through and sign up, and the vast majority of the businesses that we talked to just really weren't interested in it all. And so, it seems like there was sort of this peak in interest, like it was serving the community around, 2005, 2010. And since then, businesses just don't seem to be interested in it anymore. It's not really serving them. A few reasons this might be. First of all, the requirements are fairly extensive. They're not crazy, but there are a whole range of things. Some of them might be interesting to the businesses or kind of serving their needs, but a lot of them won't be for any given business. And business owners, especially in Albany, where these are mostly mom and pop shops, they just don't have the time to do anything extra, even if it's going to be offering them resources or maybe helping cover the costs of some of the upgrades they need. Even if there are benefits to them, sometimes it's just too much work and it's not directly targeted at what they want. And then another issue we've seen is that there's really very limited public knowledge of the program. There's just really not an advertising benefit for the businesses because people don't know about it. They see the little decal on the side of the window and they say, what's that? Yeah, but it's not really generating new business for them. So all that said, I think possibly what happened is that this was more effective back in the day when these kinds of sustainability efforts were relatively new, when people maybe didn't have any other resources to go about this kind of change, and when it might have seemed more special to be a business that was thinking about greening. Whereas nowadays, a lot of businesses are doing something to be more sustainable, and having a certification maybe isn't really doing much for them in the sort of new scheme of things. That's just one interpretation. But in any case, we have seen that interest has just really dwindled over the last 15 years. And even if we're putting a lot of energy into it, we're not really getting much back from those businesses. So all of that said, that gets us kind of into the broad lessons learned here. I think there's a lot we could analyze, and I won't go into all of the potential routes, but some of the kind of big main takeaways I had was, first of all, this need to focus on efforts that are really resonating with the community. Here I have my metaphorical horse who's not drinking water. I think I mentioned that metaphor in my staff report. We can lead them to the water, we can't make them drink, right? We can give them resources that we think are really, really awesome and promising and that are doing great things for the climate. But if it's not serving their needs, if they're not interested in it, there's nothing we can do to make it work. We can pour our heart and soul and all of our staff time and all of our money in, and we're not going to get very much out. So of course, we can't necessarily know beforehand which programs are going to be resonating with the community, but if we're seeing that it's just really not getting much positive feedback, then maybe we have to, evaluate and say, okay, this isn't where we should put our energy. Let's look at something else. Let's try something new. So, making sure we're not just pouring more and more in all the time if we're not seeing, interest at least coming back. Another lesson is it seems to be much more effective when we go to people with a very specific and limited ask of them. Both of these programs are pretty wide-ranging. They've got this whole slew of potential climate actions you can take, big requirements, a sort of infinite request for engagement. And as much as that's a really great idea from our perspective, when we want people to just be constantly engaging with us and doing lots of things, I think for most people on the other side of that, it's overwhelming and confusing, and they just kind of zone out a little bit. When we go to them with, we want you to do this really specific thing right now, usually it's easier to get people to say, oh, okay, I can do that. But when you say, sign up for this and then engage all the time for the rest of your life, that's hard, right? Another point is that it's useful to intervene at existing decision points. So, as an example, with the heat pump rebate program, we're trying to intervene and give an incentive at the moment that someone's deciding whether they want to get a new furnace or a new heat pump, right? And it's much easier to do that than it is to convince someone who hasn't ever thought about their furnace that they need to get a new heat pump and they need to go check on their furnace and see how old it is or whatever, or someone who just put in a new furnace 5 years ago. If they're not kind of in that decision-making process, you have to first get them there and then convince them. If you can intervene at a point where they're already choosing one thing over the other, it's easier to kind of shift them in the more sustainable direction. And then finally, the importance of immediate and direct benefits. This is, kind of obvious when we say it, but it's important to kind of keep in mind always that the more obvious and quick you can show someone that this is benefiting you, and that could be in a whole variety of ways, but the more effectively you can show that, the more you're going to keep their attention and inspire them to action. It doesn't necessarily have to be a monetary benefit or something. It could be, the benefit of knowing you did something good for the climate. That's a benefit too. But just understanding what the needs are of the person that you're engaging with and figuring out how you can deliver that need or deliver for them in a way that's also meeting our climate goals. Of course, that's all much easier said than done, but those are kind of some key points that I think these two examples show us the importance of. So, all of that said, I'm happy to answer any questions. This is a presentation, so there's no action required, but it's just kind of a time for the committee to discuss and reflect.
Have you asked, for feedback from the green people who did the certificate or participated in the carbon-free Albany program?
That's a great question. I have had conversations with some of the green businesses and heard some feedback from them, although it's been pretty limited. Most of them I found were not super engaged in it after they got certified. And most of our certified businesses have been certified for a long time now, so they sort of do a couple things to stay recertified, and then they're sort of not paying a lot of attention to it after that. But some of them are happy about it and think it's a good program and like to sort of have that under their belt, I guess. I haven't done any direct engagement with people who are in carbon-free Albany. I wasn't ever working very closely on that program. That was other staff members, so they might know more, but I don't have any data on that. But that would be a good thing to try and do.
Are those online assets still available, like the carbon-free Albany, like how to make your home more energy efficient or whatever? Is that stuff still online?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's still live. We haven't stopped paying for the program yet, so it's all still running right now.
Okay. I just didn't know if there would be a way to maybe repurpose that for, helpful hints for homeowners or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of information on there that, if we end the site, we could move to a different location. A lot of it is already on our home electrification website, but there are some things that don't fall into that scope that we could move over to other places.
I was wondering if you had site metrics from the carbon-free Albany. You showed the statistics on the registrations and how that peaked out, but do you have page views and that sort of thing, tricks from the website. I'm just curious about if there's learnings that we can get from that in terms of like what categories were most viewed, or where people spent the most time, or they sign up once, they put in their actions when they do them, but did people go back for more information, and what information was that? Just in terms of going forward with something would serve the community.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't have that offhand. I don't know if from our back-end view we're able to see it, but I would imagine that the staff of Community Climate Solutions would be able to pull that. So I could ask about it for sure.
Could you clarify what the points on the the carbon-free Albany, like how that functions a little bit, like in terms of incentive? Yeah, the little like stars below.
Yeah, so the sort of, it plays into the competition structure of the website. So basically, each action has a number of points associated with it that you get once you commit to the action. And then, in a challenge, whichever team has the most points at the end wins. I don't know exactly how they're calculated. It's mostly related to emissions reductions, but I think there are some actions that aren't directly reducing emissions. And so there's some sort of calculation to it, but it's mostly about emissions. Yeah, so the sort of site as it exists, you sort of just get points as you do stuff, but you can create a challenge through the site, and you can create a whole host of different challenges for different groups and build them to whatever specification. So the challenge that staff ran in 2020 was like a 6-month-long challenge, and people signed up as groups, and then whichever group had the most points at the end deadline got a prize. It's set up so you could run a school challenge where there's different classrooms in your school, and whoever wins gets a pizza party or something like that. But yeah, it's just kind of creating a framework for it.
You mentioned in your analysis sort of catching people at decision points, and I can imagine how to do that with home electrification.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other sorts of things on there? What would be like a decision point where someone might intersect with this city?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, another example I think I gave in the staff report was, we have lots of signage and educational materials around waste sorting. And one of the most effective ones we have is stickers that go on bins, where they're at the moment of throwing something in a bin, right? And they can look at it right then. So there's lots of little examples like that. I also think there's a lot of examples where it's really hard to figure out how to intervene at a decision point too. So that's an ongoing challenge. But yeah, you could imagine, another potential decision point would be, just trying to think of a place where, sometimes people come in sort of requesting information on something, for example, on street trees, and they're trying to apply to get a street tree, right? And at that point, you can intervene on trying to make sure they get a tree that works well for their lot, or you can also intervene on do you need compost for your street tree, and here's our compost oven. There's different ways to do that, but I think there's also a lot of examples where it's tricky. So if you come up with great ideas, let me know.
Are there carbon-free Berkeley, carbon-free Emeryville? And if so, are they doing about the same as we are?
So there aren't for Berkeley and Emeryville. There are for some other cities. I think there's Palo Alto. There's, I think, a few in Colorado, I think maybe San Jose. I don't remember exactly the list, but you know, there's kind of scattered throughout the states. Generally, none of them have been super successful either. Palo Alto, I think, was a little bit more successful than most. I think they kind of really got the competition thing going there, which maybe is cultural. But yeah, generally, they haven't been super successful. There's been sort of like pockets of success here and there, but.
I have a question for the chair, I guess. At some point, I had an idea about something to do regarding a decision point, and maybe now is the time, or maybe later in the agenda.
Maybe in comments?
Okay, thank you.
We're ready for public comment on this presentation.
We have one public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
Yeah, hi, Nick Peterson here. Actually, I joined the Climate Action, I was appointed to the Climate Action Committee in 2017. My interest was always to get some sort of portal on the city webpage that would provide a lot of good information for people when they were searching around trying to find what to do to address climate change. So my comment as a citizen is, if you get rid of this, you need to replace it with something, because the city website is definitely not the portal to finding climate change. In fact, you go to the city website, there is nothing on the initial landing page that says anything about climate action. And when you do the drop downs from above, it appears in only two places. And one place is I want to, and then there under the I want to column, there's learn more about, and then there's only a pick that says climate protection. So it doesn't even say climate action or climate crisis or climate action. It says climate protection, which is a little vague. And you go to that and it throws you off to a non-existing page. It says no page. So then you go, the only other place you'll find it is under sustainability. And there you click on climate action plan and climate action adaptation plan information, which doesn't exactly pop out at you. And you get to a page which still doesn't take you directly to the resource page. So again, I think this is indicative of the city's lack of seeing this as something that's front and center and should be easily accessible. I went back, I was one of the early sign-uppers on the Carbon Free Albany platform, and I went back and actually, if you just go to the actions, you can go down to the actions, and I went to the heat pump, and lo and behold, it comes up with the switches on links and Albany heat pump rebate link and the whole thing. So it's a good, once you get past sort of the confusion of, oh, it's a game or oh, it's a social media site, when you get to the actions, it's very good in helping you plan out your actions and giving you information on it, and they update it. So I would recommend don't take this thing down, because you're only going to save $3,000 or $4,000 a year for the Carbon Free Albany platform. And I don't know what the city's going to do with it, except throw it maybe at some more rebates or something. I find this a little discouraging that, this idea of getting outreach to the community, it takes huge effort, huge effort. And of course the community doesn't want to change the way they are, and of course they don't want to do certain things, but it's up to us to really kind of lead and put more emphasis on it. And I think come up with, maybe you have to require businesses to be a green business. But anyway, I just think the city needs to be more proactive on this.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
Hello, this is Sarah. I'm a newer member of the Albany Climate Action Coalition. Thank you, Michelle, for your work in composing and presenting these summaries. I am glad that there's reconsideration of Carbon Free Albany, and I do think this was an interesting experiment. I also think the current version of this website has a few faults, some that have been shared. I do see a usability issue, as I recently tried to sign up for Carbon Free Albany, but unfortunately had a lot of trouble getting past the spam robot detector for privacy security, so that may need to be looked at. And the website servers just seem to be a bit slow overall, so I'm not sure if some of this feedback has been relayed to the webmaster contractors, but I think consideration of that would be important. And overall, the website seems to have been conceived and that there was with a lot of promise, but, and I appreciate understanding that there were different groups in the community where this had been tested and rolled out. But overall, I also see another problem of the fact that this was rolled out right before the pandemic, and that could have disrupted really more attraction to the website, and that it also, as Michelle had mentioned, requires a lot of behavior change. And Nick mentioned as well that this is not just a one-time engagement. You have to constantly be including this in workflows, and the website has to sort of be ubiquitous on the government website and disseminated in the community over and over again. Otherwise, it simply won't stick. And I have experience from myself personally rolling out these type of websites and can attest to that. And I also echo a comment by a committee member earlier that we really need to work on broader reaching and wider scale solutions for every dollar that we're putting in. And I think we're lucky now that we're in an era with the federal and state government incentives and rebates that are attracting more behavior changes in energy use with heat pumps and HVACs, et cetera, EVs. And what is really lacking is education, and also, as Michelle had mentioned, this like strategic timing of that education. And I do see that a greater focus on that could be really imperative in making the changes. And within the ACAC, we're also brainstorming some other ideas on how to reach out to residents and build more engagement and education. And we will be happy to share those at another point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to our next public comment. You may begin.
Hi, this is Catherine with ACAC. Thank you again, Michelle, for all your work on summarizing these insights. Super helpful to see the history of recent work on this. I happen to have a background in psychology and corporate and startup marketing. So this is kind of my area. And wanted to share info about some perspective on the marketing piece of this. That I think it's great to have a single point resource to people get involved. I agree it can feel frustrating to do all this outreach and not have a lot of updates, but if for organizations that are like a startup or a large company, they don't do one event or even 1 year of events and then call it done. Changing behavior and changing minds, whether you're changing purchase behavior or consumer behavior or sustainability behaviors, whatever the behaviors are, takes time and ongoing marketing work. There's actually a whole field of this, like the idea of nurture marketing or email marketing or multi-channel marketing. And this is something that I'd be happy to be an advisor to city folks on if you want to hear more about different ways to approach this. There's technology aspects to this as well of you don't tend to have a lot of success with standalone websites. It's important to integrate them into other areas. Like Nick pointed out, it's hard to find this on the city website, and it's important to include these different initiatives in multiple different channels, whether that's local Facebook groups, email lists the city puts out, printed mailers with quarterly activities the city does. There's already other channels that are already happening, city council meetings, these meetings, like where are the ongoing points of contact that already exist, and including reminders about this and other action that people take in those existing channels, next door, et cetera. So taking a more holistic view and this idea of nurture marketing to integrate this could help this have better success. I also agree with Nick that a couple $1,000s is not a lot of money. It's maybe like 1 or 2 heat pump rebates. So I think it's probably worth keeping for the short term, but would love to see and possibly help discuss how do you improve this existing site to integrate it better into existing formats. I think the problem is not the website, the problem is the integrations and the thinking about what's the nurture email marketing or the comprehensive marketing strategy for it. As the psychology piece, again, behavior change typically takes a long time, and getting people at decision points is important. And thinking about how you get the most bang for your buck, I understand that's important as well. So I understand that the heat pump rebates can be a big point focus. That's an area that people are deciding about what to do in terms of getting a gas furnace or heat pump, getting people where they're interested and able to make a decision is important, but the education piece of where do I start, where do I begin, it's a journey from awareness to consideration to action, and taking a holistic approach and perhaps a little bit more effort, a more strategic effort could help get the bang for their buck that we're looking for here. So thanks for listening and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our last public comment for this item. You may begin.
This is Lucinda Young, another member of Albany Climate Action Coalition. I was also one of the first, or one of the early folks that signed on to join Carbon Free Albany. And I actually even, our family won one of the prizes for having the biggest reductions. I think that was back in 2020. I have to say that I found it cumbersome, and I have, although it took quite a bit of time to complete the survey, and I spent quite a bit of time doing that. I think that's one of the barriers, and I really haven't looked at it much in the last probably 2 years. I know the city has done outreach. I see signs around Albany on our waste bins, public waste bins, about carbon-free Albany. I have also, I remember the webinar that was held a couple of years ago by a couple of the Climate Action Committee members led a webinar on it. I don't think there were a lot of members of the public that attended that. And I try to do outreach myself, encouraging neighbors and friends to sign on, and it has not been a successful endeavor. So I think there are some problems with it. However, I think as some of the other speakers mentioned, something needs to, if we're going to discontinue this, something needs to be in its place. There is a very strong need for outreach in our community. I think the event that we had last month, the Community Expo, and there were 2 Climate Action Committee members, Committee Member Meldrum and McClanahan, who attended that and did outreach. I think we need more of that. So basically, I understand the concerns with this website, that it has not been very fruitful, and it may not be the best bang for our buck, but something needs to be in its place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all for public comment.
Thank you, commenters. We'll move on to discussion.
I'll lead off, I guess. Thanks very much for the analysis, and having been here from when it got initiated through all the trials and tribulations, I totally appreciate that it hasn't resounded in terms of the way that it was pitched of this, community, and competition engagement. I feel the same way as a lot of the speakers. Thanks for the public speaking. You mentioned the intervention at the point of decision making, and I think information, education, awareness, all that has to be there before the point of decision, and then you also have to be there at the point of decision. So it's a really difficult thing to do, but like a heat pump, a water heater, when that goes down, that family is like going to replace their water heater. It's not like, having gone through it a few years ago, it's not a question of like, oh yeah, let's start some research now. It's like, get it done. So if this website is not serving the purpose of the competition and all that, that's why I asked the question about the content, because there is a lot of good content there. And I agree with the speakers, it's not easy to navigate, it's not easy to find information. But before we take it down, I would want to see us, not try again and again and again, but, figure out a way to use the information. Building that information, building that website initially was a big lift. And so I would hate to see it just taken down and lose all that access. So to me, it would be worth continuing it on for a period of time. I don't know how expensive it is, but I'd like to see it continue on and there were some good ideas thrown out. Maybe it's time for another effort, but change the tone of it maybe a little bit. I don't know. But I would want to see it continue to stay up for now.
I stumbled on the site when we first moved here, and I was Googling climate in Albany, and had the same troubles that a lot of our commenters have mentioned in engaging with the site, and did not choose to engage with the site at all, because the game mentality was not hooking me in. Thank you for that analysis. That was like a really, a really good and meaty and succinct, like, lessons learned. And I'm chewing on it. I'm curious whether we can reach back to the vendor, because it really doesn't seem like it's that much money that we're spending on it, and see if they're open to a modification of the product to better meet our needs. It might be. I'm also curious about something like a commenter mentioned how hard it is to find climate info on our website. I was kind of curious about the workflow that would go into adjusting our website, and not making it a big 2-year project. But I also want to, this is a lot of comments all at once, but I wanted to agree with the commenter, I think it was Sarah, who was talking about sort of the human part to this, human component to this. If I had stumbled on that website and there'd been like an easy way to interface with sustainability coordinator, or, or an event that was coming up, like, that would have made all the difference. So I like the concept, and then I think Catherine was talking about integration of whatever site we have, better integrating our efforts to that site, because it did feel a little like disembodied when I engaged with it.
I can add that we are currently in the process of updating our city website right now. We're in the middle of that big 2-year project. So that is something that's ongoing, and we are working on like a complete and total upgrade of the website that's gonna really kind of change all the ways it's organized. And so we're hoping as part of that to make a lot of this information much easier to access. And, there's potentially a way to put a lot of the information from Carbon Free Albany into the city website, or maybe something else. But yes, that's ongoing right now. We're working on it. So hopefully that'll help remedy some of those issues about not being able to access our city information very easily.
Thanks. This is helpful and informative. I think that, I'm hearing people ask to keep the subscription going or whatever. I haven't looked at the content in a long time. I did look when it first launched and found the series of questions overwhelming, even for me who loves to geek out on this stuff. I was like, how long is this thing going to take me to fill out? It's like going on and on. A lot has changed since 2019 in the technology and the pricing and, availability of product and everything around heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, EVs, the sorts of things that this site would cover. So I wouldn't renew unless that information is up to date. I mean, that would be my recommendation. Like, I don't think the city should continue a subscription if whoever's curating the content is not keeping it current. I think it would be a disservice to have outdated information that we're encouraging people to use, but I'm not saying that it is. I haven't looked at it, but I would be concerned if this program is not doing well, if they have the bandwidth to keep up or to make modifications for us. If they can, that's great. If they're keeping it up to date, great. If not, maybe not. But I do think there's demand and need to provide good information around electrification, and the city is a trusted source. So it would be nice to have some assets that help inform customers about how to get these projects done, and or maybe like ask a neighbor or something. I'm finding for myself, thinking about getting a heat pump water heater. I've read a lot, I've watched webinars about it and stuff, but really I just want to talk to a few people who have them and like, how many showers can you really take? You know, those sorts of questions that you don't really get off of a website. So I don't know if there's the possibility for that sort of interaction, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I really like the presentation and the memo as well. I'll just add on to Dan's comment. I looked into heat pump water heaters, and I had a simple question. I just asked, I want to listen to one of these in person. How loud is 50 decibels? And I couldn't find a way to do that. It's ridiculous. Other people have mentioned, and Nick Peterson also mentioned, I would love to see a list on the City of Albany website that just says, here are things that you can do to reduce emissions. Maybe they could be in alphabetical order, order of impact, whatever, but just not exactly a checklist, but just a list. Here's the things that you can do, and then for each one, maybe if you click, you could get more information about that one. So is that part of the redesign, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we do have some resources like that existing on the website now, but they're not easy to find. So yeah, I think, as we're in the process of redesigning it, we'll think about ways to make that better organized. I think there's some limits to what we can do within the city website, just in that, we want to make sure it's mostly focused on city services and kind of the direct work that we're doing as a city. But one thing we do have is we have an entire website dedicated to electrification that's run and updated by the city, by me, and gets into a lot of the specifics around that in particular. And there is space within that we could branch out into some other areas of sustainability and kind of touch them lightly and maybe have some resources. So that might be a better way to do it. I can look at that more, but yes, we can definitely think about how to better organize our resources and advice for people looking to do more climate actions.
One of the things that people have talked about as a way to reduce carbon emissions is there are dietary changes in waste reduction and so on, and they'd be pretty hard to find if they were in a home electrification page. So maybe a different way to format it from the top would be a good idea.
Yeah, and we can definitely put some information on our standard city website too. Like I said, we already have some information. It's just sort of, limits to how much detail we want to go into there without straying from being the city website. But yeah, we can definitely think about the most effective way to make sure we're getting this information out to the public.
Could the city have a link to a nonprofit organization that maintained a website like this, like the Albany Climate Action Coalition, where they had a kind of a one-stop shop? Here's all the different things that you could do: food waste, heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, the whole shebang. And if you went to the city website, it would very easily kick you over to that. Is that legal?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have lots of resources on our website already. Usually these things are sort of organized by content. Like, for instance, Stop Waste has tons and tons of resources related to waste, and we have many, many links to Stop Waste very prominently displayed in all the relevant places. So yeah, we're definitely doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think what the best one-stop starting point would look like. I'm having trouble imagining what that would be, because it would have, maybe links to Stop Waste, maybe links to heat pumps, all but on one page, so that a person could look at this and go, did that, this is interesting, maybe with some kind of quantification of the impact as a one-stop shop to start. And if that could be on Albany city website, that'd be great. If you could link to something that somebody else could do, that would be great. But that would be something I'd really like to see.
I want to observe that we're getting a little off into the weeds in talking about the website, and those are weeds that I want to hang out into. And I'm wondering, what is the timeline for this website process, and how can either members of the public or the committee give our input on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. You know, theoretically, we could have an entire discussion item in an upcoming meeting that's just about, you know, recommendations for the website. I don't know that we have a specific launch date, but we're in the process of starting to build out the website now. I would have to look into some of the more specifics about how that's going and how much, I don't know how much control exactly we have over larger scale organization, but there's a lot more in terms of content, so we could discuss that as a separate item.
That would be really great. Because we got to do it through the lens of climate. Like, you're talking about, you know, it's, well, we need to organize it through city business because it's a city website, and I think that's a yes. But also, if the city has just agreed that we're going to do all our business through the lens of climate, then I'll put that on the website.
I hate to try anyone's patience, but I did want to roll out another idea, and it has to do with your decision point. I think that's a great idea. At some point this summer, we might have a multi-day heat wave, and by day 2 or 3 or 4, people in Albany are going to be thinking, you know, maybe it's time to buy a window air conditioner. And at that point, it would be nice if we had something already stored up and ready to roll out that says, you know, heat pumps provide air conditioning too. And there's these rebates and on and on and on. So I don't want to go into depth on that because it's something new tonight. Nobody's had a chance to think about it. But maybe that could be teed up for discussion at some future meeting or something like that.
Perhaps could even be something for the Electrification Outreach Committee, Subcommittee to talk about.
Any more discussion on this item?
I'll just put in one last comment. Yeah, thank you. I think for me, those metrics were great. I think that kind of 200 collective signups kind of said enough for me about kind of the efficacy of this. And I guess for me, when I was looking at the website, it didn't seem, I mean, I really liked the format of the actions, but they didn't seem all that tailored to Albany in the end. So I guess it seemed like the type of resources that are there could be already pretty well covered by the type of electrification guides or things like Switches On that's already linked to on the website. So yeah, I fully agree with the recommendation here to not renew and kind of see if there's other ways to better use it, say with groups that are pay them to do more ongoing like direct outreach. So yeah, thank you for that presentation.
Okay, great. We'll move on to item 6, which is subcommittee updates. There are 3 subcommittees currently. First one is the Environmental Justice and Education Subcommittee.
I think we've been kind of having a hard time coordinating, so I think either from now, we'll kind of look into next steps if we can get, since committee member Muhammad is leaving, trying to get someone working directly at the high school or an AUSD, and if that seems not possible, then we'll probably sunset until further notice. So we'll see next month if we can get someone who's going to be involved at like a more education level to like coordinate with, or someone else that's interested in coordinating, like kind of more from like an AUSD perspective, because that's what kind of the intentions behind it were. But I'll probably talk to you and we can kind of coordinate something, but we'll wait until next month to see like what a final decision on that is.
I'll add, could go either way. I would probably recommend sunsetting the subcommittee in this meeting because, you know, assuming we have a new member that wants to join and work on something related to this, it's often best to kind of recreate that subcommittee with that new member's vision in mind, and, you know, and that way it can be like, okay, what's the title, what's the task of the subcommittee, sort of starting fresh, especially since it has been kind of not producing a lot in the last couple of months. So that would be my recommendation for it. However, the committee likes, you can just kind of keep it as it is and refresh it later on, you know, next month or whenever.
Yeah, I think that's valid, and just like waiting to see like who the new person is and if they want to or not want to work on that, because I think it's going to be on my end just difficult to coordinate that on my own.
Just for logistics, we could, you know, create a motion and vote on that action now if the committee wants to, or wait till the end of the section. But it might be, if the committee wants to sunset it tonight, probably be easiest to do it. We could do public comment for this and then move into discussion for this subcommittee and do the action. Or we could do all the subcommittees, public comment, and then actions for this and other subcommittees. So order's kind of a chair call, but.
Yeah, I think we should, since we normally do all the updates,
Okay.
and then any motions we can capture.
Okay,
Great. At the end. All right, zero emission transportation.
So our group, in order to learn more about the options for curbside EV charging, we did some research on vendors that provide that service, identified 4, invited them all to speak to our subcommittee. The 4 were VoltPost, It's Electric, Flow, and EVgo. And we spoke with 3 of them. We had them pitch to our committee on the services that they provide, their business model, that sort of thing. And it was very interesting. I think we all, like, I don't know, we haven't really had much time to debrief, but they were very interesting presentations. They all occurred since our last meeting. And I think we're wondering about how, if a next step might be to present our learnings to this group, you know, as a presentation, just sharing the sort of the approach of each of those 3 businesses as a possible consideration for the city to pursue.
Yeah, like you said, we haven't had a chance, and thanks, Dan, for organizing that. That's been really interesting. And, you know, we kind of said to both the ones that, you know, it's like our process is, you know, we're the recommending to city council, to staff, and they totally understood that because they work with a lot of municipalities. But yeah, if we put together something for next meeting, and then we can, you know, see all of it down in front of us, see what we want to recommend to city council.
See, yeah, and I guess, yeah, it'll be interesting to see too if we could, you know, yeah, what are the steps to take it forward? Because we do potentially have this action to city council to put some capital improvement project funding towards a public charging solution. So I guess there's some options to either try to direct the research we've done towards that, or kind of make it into a separate, more specific curbside public charging recommendation or some type of pilot project. But I guess, yeah, first we'll put all the learnings we've learned about different curbside options, business models, yeah, kind of long-term thinking about how you get these chargers to be useful and go to the right, you know, type of EV drivers.
I just wanted to add one more thing, just for the committee's, you know, just thinking through. One of the questions we asked them was, is this sort of a drop in while you're shopping kind of thing, or is it a, you know, a residential, you know, alternative when you don't have access to a garage or something like that? And Two of them were more geared towards residential, you know, and we talked about the high rental population in Albany, and that really dovetailed nicely with what their business models were. So it's not just, you know, like the Whole Foods parking lot kind of charging stations. It was, you know, different business models. So I just didn't want you to think it was just one thing.
Procedural question. Do we do all the updates and then all the questions? Or update questions, update questions?
I think you can decide that, as long as we don't do any comments before we do public comment.
I think we should do questions after each subcommittee so we don't lose the thread. I have a question. I'm wondering if you might also, when you come and present about what you learned from the vendors, be willing to provide a little of your analysis on, you know, what looks good and why. I think that might be helpful in terms of streamlining the eventual decision-making.
Do I understand one of these vendors has privately owned chargers on public property? Is that the model?
I don't know how deep to go into this, but there are different ownership models, there are different fee models, there are different technologies, whether some of them you bring your own wand, some of them they have a wand there, some of them are on street lamps, which are city-owned, some of them would be on a private property attached to a business meter. They're quite varied.
Thank you.
Mark, do you want to give the update from home electrification?
Yeah, and I hope others will chime in. Katie and I were at a table at the Albany Community Expo along with Nick Peterson and Lucinda Young, and we attracted a nice crowd. A lot of people came by. There was a heat pump demo that sat on a table stuck up, and it had two big dial thermometers showing the ambient temperature in the room and the temperature in the space that was being heated by the heat pump, which was actually a side of a dorm-style refrigerator. And it was very nice. Michelle put together a beautiful presentation, which I've asked her to send around to the committee. So I thought it was a success.
It was my impression too. It was really fun to see how many people were interested in just checking out the heat pump demo and also just having conversations. We had a lot of one-on-one conversations, and I want to mention also from ACAC that Jean and Catherine also came, and we talked to, and David was there, and it was great. It was fun. I look forward to whatever the next event is that we can do more outreach.
Also, I'll ask Michelle to send around a photo of the heat pump demo, but if anybody wants to borrow it, I'm happy to lend it to you, show you how to set it up.
I'll just ask the committee to touch on this briefly. Now that the electrification outreach subcommittee sort of completed this task you had been working on for the last couple of months, you know, the interest of thinking through the committee's or the subcommittee's goals, do you feel like you're sort of still continuing on the same path of kind of coming up with more opportunities to do electrification outreach? Or do you feel like you're sort of, okay, we check something off the box and we want to shift the way that this subcommittee looks, or sort of what our goals are? Where are you at with that?
I'm glad you asked. I like this quick, efficient subcommittee thing. We checked in about it over email, and we would like to continue doing outreach. I recognize that we don't want to do continuous efforts through subcommittees, but I think that's the next idea, business knocking on people's doors, possibly during a heat wave, possibly other door knocking that's more comfortable. So that's sort of the next outreach we want to do. so I guess we keep meeting as a subcommittee until that's done and then reassess? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds like you have the same vision for the subcommittee that you did beforehand, so that was.
Got it.
I just had, first that sounded awesome and sounds inspiring to get out there and talk to people. I just had one question on how you all organized this. Did you guys have your own table at the expo? And I guess, what was the umbrella you used to kind of be the group that got this information out?
We've accidentally stepped onto it again. We thought we were going to have our own table and then, and had planned as such, and then found out that they didn't want to have our committee have their own table, because then potentially every committee would want their own table and there would be too many tables. And it was indeed, I had never been to an expo before, it was very crowded. So in the end, it was good we shared a table with ACAC. And that was honestly also good, because I feel like this is definitely like a partnership kind of thing. Like almost all of our commenters are from ACAC, so getting to like actually just hang out, that was good too. I wouldn't mind having our own table. That would be good. Maybe at a different event.
Great.
I think we're ready. No more questions for public comment on the subcommittee updates.
We'll begin with public comment. Maybe again when you're ready.
Thank you. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition. So a couple thoughts on the sort of environmental justice education subcommittee. I think that's a good idea to give them a rest for a while when you get your new member. I think there's still much to be done around, and especially environmental justice. And I would strongly recommend that any of the Measure DD funds have specific minimum amounts that need to be used to assist Albany's disadvantaged and underrepresented populations. So it doesn't all just flood to upper middle class people to offset, something they can already afford. On the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee, thank you guys. Great work going out and talking to some of these vendors. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening. But one thing I think that needs to be followed up on, and maybe even a second phase, is the multifamily housing electric charge installation. I think there's a need to kind of look at that. There's been some studies about doing even level 1, that's advantageous versus nothing. You see a lot of people hanging cords out windows and running them across the sidewalks. And if that can be addressed to get people in apartment buildings at least trickle charging overnight enough to go their 30-mile round trip to work, that's a really good thing. And then the electrification subcommittee, I have to say you had a great time with Katie and Mark at the Community Expo. It was very interesting. I think there's definitely a strong need to do proactive outreach to the citizens of Albany and try to capture them before they make that, this idea of like getting a window air conditioner or a instant gas hot water heater. People are still really gobbling those up. And if somehow we could get to them before they made those decisions, that would be good. I also think this idea of a point of listing, I'm now convinced maybe even just rating that the real estate agents would embrace would be a good thing to try to get going. Maybe partner with the Albany or real estate agents that operate in Albany to at least get a rating or some kind of evaluation and say, oh, here's a way to get a free evaluation. Just really push that, because eventually we're going to want everybody in Albany to evaluate and be monitored and have some sort of plan to electrify. And if we don't start something, it's just going to be harder and harder as we go along. So I'm very encouraged by that. I think that's something that this subcommittee could work on. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Amy Smolens. I'm not in ACAC, but it's a cute name. I have a question for the people in the Zero Emission Transportation Committee. Just want to know if you've discussed bicycling, which is outside of walking, the lowest emission and least polluting and least expensive form of transportation. Albany's 1 square mile, so there's really nowhere, school, shopping, transit, recreation, that people can't bike, scooter, walk, including to transit, to BART. Scooters and bikes of all types are affordable and accessible and non-polluting, and they're available for people of all ages and abilities. So just want to know how you're addressing that area of zero emissions transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our last public comment.
I agree with the previous speakers. I understand that there's a bike path possibly on Solano Avenue coming up at some point for the Active Transportation Commission or something like that. That would be really cool. I do bike a lot personally. This is Catherine again, also an ACAC, and agree with bicycling being important. Also agree with the previous speakers, Nick, around getting more multi-family chargers and enhancing equity. In terms of the home electrification piece, Portland, Oregon has a free home energy score that you see when you buy a house there. So the houses are rated according from a 1 to 10 scale on energy efficiency. That's something that would be very relevant and helpful, I think, also to have in Albany if it's available. Taking a marketing and psychology outreach type of lens, again, we need to build awareness, then get people to consider the heat pumps and induction and alternatives to gas, and then have them interested at the point of decision is really this ongoing need for outreach. It's great to connect with Katie and others at the Albany Community Expo. Ongoing outreach is so important and needed, and just want to reiterate that this matters. I think 90% of water heater replacements are upon failure, meaning that people don't think about it till it breaks. And getting people before things break, because it could take a week or two, maybe 3 or longer, to replace a water heater with a heat pump or a heat pump HVAC system for gas, and maybe they need electric upgrade or service upgrade or electrical work that needs to be done first. The awareness piece is important, not just decision. So because we have to think about this holistically, from people who don't know it's an issue to think about it, this is planning for it, and being ready when the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, BACMUD, rules start coming out 2027, 2029, people can no longer buy gas furnaces and water heaters. So they need to be aware that in this couple of years, this could be potentially, a heat wave thing before a heat wave, or before a cold snap, as well as this ongoing awareness. So that's awareness, consideration, decision are kind of 3 stages of consumer purchase decisions that are relevant to think about when we think about reaching out about changing behaviors for electrification of appliances. So wanted to also ask about public chargers for the Zero Emission Committee around light poles or overhead drops. So that's an option to put charging spots next to existing utility poles. I heard that's a thing. Maybe that's not a thing. Curious to know more about that as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That is all for public comment.
Okay, now it's time for a discussion of the subcommittee updates as well as any motions people may have.
So I might recommend adding a few more minutes onto our meeting time since we do still have the future agenda items after this.
I'd like to move that we extend the meeting to 9:10. How's that sound?
Second.
Member Soon. Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Chair Vihil McClanahan?
Yes.
I don't know, I'm wondering, Michelle, if you would be willing to answer or address the questions that Amy Smolens asked about bicycling in terms of the role of our committee versus the role of the Transportation Committee?
Yes, excellent question. It's a challenging line in some ways because there's some overlap. Generally, the Transportation Commission works on a lot of the physical infrastructure the creation of new bike lanes and that sort of thing. And much of our work related to biking access has to do with infrastructure. That said, there are ways for this committee to be involved in trying to expand biking, especially when it comes to things related to funding, to outreach, to sometimes to smaller infrastructure things, such as like bike parking, things related to that. Biking campaigns this committee could be involved in, trying to expand access to electric bikes. So, kind of all the things on the edges of the actual on-the-ground infrastructure. That said, it's not like there's like some very clear list between the two. And I think it sort of, as ideas come up, and there are also some ways that the two commissions, the Transportation Commission and the Climate Action Committee, can work together. That can be tricky sometimes, and it's best if there's like a really specific project that involves both of them, but that kind of collaboration can happen.
And just to add on to that, we actually have City Council's approval to have co-committee meetings. So we have Ken McCroskey, who's attended Zero Emission Transportation Committee meetings. We've fallen off a little bit, but we could definitely do an update. So we have been involved in the active transportation plan and input to that through that venue.
Yeah, thank you, absolutely.
I just want to appreciate Amy for bringing that up, because that was a burning question that I had. And actually, I did not realize that I kind of was under the impression that we were not really to work on bikes at all. So thank you for clarifying all the many ways that we could.
Yeah, kind of on the theme of the topic that was teed up about refreshing subcommittees. I think it might not be a bad idea to kind of scope the current Zero Emission Transportation Committee. I mean, for the past 8 or so months, we've been very focused on EVs, so we could potentially rescope as that to kind of free up capacity if there is another subcommittee that really wants to dial in on active transportation the next couple months, 6 months. So yeah, open to that as well to make sure that topic gets all the attention it deserves.
Any further discussion on the subcommittee updates? I swear I had something. Oh, thank you, the commenter, who I think was Nick, who talked about the idea of putting a floor on monies spent from DD toward low-income households. That would be fun to think about in the context of outreach for home electrification.
I had 2 quick responses, and I'll make it quick. One, I agreed with the comments from Nick around multifamily charging, and level 1 strategy is quite a good one to try to get basically more ports out there. I had a good conversation with the transportation programs manager at Peninsula Clean Energy that serves most of, I believe it's San Mateo County. They've gone all in for their multifamily charging strategy of promoting level 1 chargers. You can get, way more in, usually less upgrades, and it's usually fairer too, because everyone can have one instead of getting maybe a couple ports where then the first person who has an EV kind of claims ownership of that port, and it can be hard for others. Thought it was really interesting, and definitely some good context out there in our different CCAs to talk about their programs and bring that into what we're doing. And then one short one on, I think Catherine asked about utility pole as an option for curbside charging. That was not included in any of the vendors we spoke to. I know there can be some difficulties there too around like who owns the utility pole and if it gets too crowded with all the different amenities that are on the pole. So not currently in the curbside options we're looking into. But yeah, we could certainly talk about some of those challenges in the presentation we do next meeting.
All right, I think we're done with discussion, and we're on to future agenda items. And in my notes, last time we structured this as public comment first, then discussion. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think it could go either way, but probably best to do public comment first.
All right. Let's do that. So it's 9, and we're adjourning in 10 minutes. So I would like to request, I think that the public comment concerning future agenda items be brief, so we have time if anyone on the committee also wants to respond. So 2 minutes? 2 minutes, please, per person.
All right, we'll begin with public comment.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to make this quick. Nick Peterson, CAC. So I think, and this came up in Michelle's last comments, there's a bit of stovepiping going on in the city, and I think it would behoove the Climate Action Committee to look at ways that that can be broken down so that there isn't this resistance to looking at things through this lens of climate action. You know, that, like one thing I found surprising with this gas vehicle purchase was that here we have a group, the Climate Action Committee, working on it, and they weren't even aware this was happening. So I think somehow if the silos of the different areas of the city can be communicating a bit more so that we know what's going on and it can be done more efficiently and there's more collaboration and people are more open, you know, Public Works is more open to using electrified tools, that kind of thing. It seems like there's a real need for that. And that might be something that the Climate Action Committee wants to address, given that we've made this emergency climate emergency declaration. Anyway, I think that's very critical to what's going on. And then I think also electrification of city facilities, not just the vehicles, but the actual facilities. I think there's an opportunity to maybe pick a facility and move it forward, especially like the community center, where there's a lot of exposure to that building, especially, you know, cooking classes that could be done on, you know, just taking it to a certain level of electrification. And that would be put ahead of, I know the city likes to spend a lot of time doing this. It'd be also nice to get an update on the DD funds. I know when that was presented by Jeff Bond, it looked like it was gonna be a year before anything would come back and say, here's how we're gonna spend the DD funds. So that's another thing to talk about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next public comment.
Yes, Lucinda Young with Albany Climate Action Coalition. I'll try to be very brief. I first want to support what Nick Peterson just said about putting in place a mechanism so that the lens of climate action, that decisions are made through the lens of climate action, which is part of the declaration. I feel like this decision that the city made on this gas parking enforcement vehicle was a prime example of decisions not being made through the lens of climate action. I see that as a top priority. Other things I would like to see, there has been some discussion at previous meetings of an agenda item for a tree protection ordinance, like Palo Alto and some other cities have, and I would again like to see that. And also Michelle had, and our Civic Sparks fellow did an excellent presentation last month on the disposable foodware ordinance, and I would like to see that pursued, and hopefully we'll get a draft from staff soon on that. And also electrification, moving towards electrification of city facilities, and I agree that the community center would be an ideal place to start. And even if there is not funding to completely electrify, we could at least get some induction hobs or some things start moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to our next public comment. You may begin when you're ready. All right, we'll move on to our next and should be last public comment. You may begin when you're ready.
I don't agree with the previous speaker. This is Catherine at ACAC. Just itemize the 6 items for the agenda. 1, on city facility identification plan. 2, more electric vehicles. 3, climate coordinator to ensure city actions has led to climate emergency. Item 4, tree protection ordinance for native trees, like Pelto or SF. 5, city-owned building identification. And 6, reusable foodware ordinance. So just to summarize, thanks so much.
Thank you. That is all for public comment.
All right, anything from the committee on future agenda items? I would love to talk about the website if that is possible to do next month. Is there a vendor doing that, or is that in-house?
We do have a vendor, but also people in-house working on it.
So you're saying a future agenda item to a review of what's going on with the website and.
Provide input, yeah.
I agree. We need to put the subcommittee,
Yes.
the zero emission update. Is that part of this? Is that part of the subcommittee update?
Depends on how much you
It can
want
be
to.
part of subcommittee updates, or it can be its own item, but it doesn't hurt to put it on here.
What I was guessing is I thought you were talking about the fact that we did not wrap up the order of business of deciding whether and how to sunset the Environmental Justice and Education Subcommittee. It's really late, but it's not that late.
Yeah, I think we passed that section, so we
Yeah.
can leave it for this month and
Right.
then
Revisit.
let's see what happens.
Sounds good.
If there are no other future agenda items, I do also have kind of a future scheduling item, which is that our next meeting in June is on June 19th, which is a city holiday. We need to reschedule. So I was just hoping I could quickly poll the members for some possible dates. Could you just raise your hand if you are unavailable or probably unavailable on the following dates? So anybody unavailable on June 10th? I don't know. Monday. June 12th. Also does not work. Okay. June 24th. Maybe not great. June 26th. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I will definitely send out a follow-up email. Just wanted to get a pulse check to help with scheduling as far in advance as we can. But I will send out a follow-up email so we can confirm. Thank you all for that.
Okay, because we have 2 minutes left. I have a sort of another procedural question. Hearing a lot of feedback about feeling like there isn't enough communication across all channels, I'm curious about discussing the possibility of, like, maybe sending one of us to each city council meeting. Like, there's a lot of us, so it wouldn't be a very large time commitment. If we wanted to talk about that, is that something you would agendize or something you could fit in some other more informal way? Cool, thank you.
I'll think about that and get back to you.
Thank you. Any more items for the next agenda? All right, woo-hoo. We're going to adjourn this meeting. This is a really good meeting. It is 9:09.